everyone. It's my pleasure to be here with you all today. I think of this presentation when Audrey asked me as sort of a coming out process for Durham Children's Aid. Durham Children's Aid recently created this position, the Anti-Oppressive Practice Integration Leader. That's my title. It's a mouthful of a title. And when I'm out and about, people say, what in the world does an anti-oppressive practice integration leader do? And so it's a great conversation starter, but I don't know how accessible the language necessarily is to community out there. So it's definitely a work in process. But the word leader, the organization felt very strongly that word, as opposed to manager or coordinator, should be in there. And so since I began the position, I've really been working internally. We are a complex organization of about 350 staff. I'm one out of 5 or 6 people in the entire province to hold a title like this and do this work. So I do work with my colleagues around the province. And it is about changing an entire system. So I do see myself as a change agent working from within the system. So that's a bit about me and our journey. So as I began with the organization, I started working very closely with our executive director, Wanda Secord, who has been a critical champion, and our leadership team. And we had some very intense dialogue, shall I say, for the first year that I was there in terms of what anti-oppression really is. So you've created this position, you've hired me, that's great, I'm here. But when I say AO for anti-oppression and you say AO, are we all talking about the same thing? Diversity and inclusion are very nice sounding words, but anti-oppression is, it's not as nice and friendly. So what are we talking about here? Are we talking about AOP light, or are we really going to go for AO? And so through a process, again, a collaborative process of intense dialogue and discussion and sometimes debate, as an organization, we came up with our organizational AOP directional statement. So along with our vision and mission statement, this is a new statement, and you will begin to see this on our website, on all of our promotional material. This will be out there, and we've just launched this internally with our staff, and of course this is our next step, is to launch it with all of you who are part of our community. So our AOP directional statement is, so we are committed to anti-oppressive practice in which we challenge the impacts of power and privilege, eliminate barriers, and are inclusive of the broad range of diversity in our community. So again, this took us a while. We have a whole policy, an AOP policy, that we've also created that brings meaning to this statement. So it's not just some nice words to put on a pamphlet, but we are now held accountable. And now that you are all aware of this, you can certainly hold us accountable. We do say eliminate barriers, not some of the barriers some of the time, but just eliminate barriers. So that's what we are working towards. It's quite a tall order. We are trying to change an entire system, and I know I was giving the person from the police a little bit of a hard time earlier, but according to the community, we're worse than the police. We have the power to take your kids away, and we are in the homes of people. So it's one thing to be in a professional setting like this and talk about diversity and equity, but what I say is the rubber really hits the road is when you're in someone's home and you're assessing, how good of a parent someone is. You are asking questions about sleeping arrangements and who sleeps with who, and you're asking kids about good touch and bad touch. So we are really intensely involved with families at a very core level, and that's when a lot of our hidden biases can come out, ones that we're not aware of when we put on our blazers and we come to work and we put on our work face. We're not aware of actually what's happening in our homes. So just to give you a background in terms of anti-oppression and child welfare in the province of Ontario, the reason why this is really important is it was mandated in 1999 for all the schools of social work. We are one of the largest employers of social workers in the province. And so in the curriculums, the Bachelor of Social Work programs and the MSW programs, it is mandated that anti-oppression be a part of the curriculum. And now, over a decade later, anti-oppression and social work are pretty much the same thing. We talk to new people graduating from those programs, and I know because I teach and I went through this process. There is no separation. There's no AO and social work. It's just all the same thing. Now, when they come into our organization to do practicums or they're new hires, they really struggle with how far behind our organization really is. So again, speaking to the need for this at Durham Children's Aid, there's no shortage of research out there And if you're interested, I can certainly send you links and links and links of articles, studies, talking about the oppressive outcomes of child welfare, right from the 60s scoop, which is the beginning of child welfare with the Aboriginal community, and a very dark history that we are still trying to overcome, certainly in our community in Durham. So the Ontario Association of Children's Societies formed an anti-oppression roundtable, which we are a part of. Now, I get to have the honor and privilege of critiquing Durham CAS quite a bit. I get to have that unique position of having to go into my executive director's office and say how great she is, but also where she can improve, which sometimes can be a challenge doing that with your boss. But this is really something that is happening across the province. I do commend Durham Children's Aid for being the 5th agency in the entire province. We have about 43 CSs, being the 5th agency to actually create this position and commit and put a statement, a very bold statement like that out there to the public that we will now be held accountable to. So Durham CS is very much a leader in the province in committing to AO. So today I'm going to talk about the AO equity lens, and I know Tracy kind of talked about it a little bit, so that was great. What I keep saying with my organization is, as we go through this change process, there's going to be what we call scaffolding, and there's going to be the actual building blocks, the bricks, the foundation, the pillars of the actual AO building that we're trying to build from ground up. So here's a picture of our beautiful building during the building process, and you'll see the scaffolding. Now if you've been to by the way, how many of you here have been to our building in Oshawa? Okay, great. I hope that all of you can visit us at some point. So you don't see the scaffolding now. It's a beautiful building, and we're very blessed to have it. But the scaffolding was really important as part of that building process. So I keep using that analogy with my leadership team that some things are going to be scaffolding. It's going to be eventually invisible, but it's really important. And some things are going to be part of the permanent structure. So the AO equity lens is going to be part of our permanent structure from here on end. Every policy, and we have about 800 internal policies, will have to go through this review. So you can imagine, the scope, the hard work that will be involved in that. And this equity lens is going to be used for not only policies, but also procedures, practices, structures, forms, and guidelines. So literally it can be applied to anything. And as Tracy mentioned, the City of Toronto has been a leader. I was actually there when they were rolling it out as part of their training. The Ontario Public Service also has an inclusion lens. So this one that I'm going to show you here today has been specifically created for child welfare. And so I created this with Durham Children's Aid in mind. So this is the lens. And I know the print is really small, and certainly you can always connect with me after today to get more details. But really, an equity lens, as Tracy mentioned earlier, is really just a set of questions that we ask. A lot of organizations will ask folks to have a budget statement, like what is the budget impact of whatever you're putting forth, right, for approval. Well, the same thing with an equity lens. What is the equity impact to what it is that you're putting forth, whether it's a policy, program, or a procedure. And so this is really three questions. And again, this is a little bit different than the one that Tracy talked about earlier, because it's really specific to child welfare and, of course, to our specific AO journey. So 3 questions basically are, first of all, what is the intended impact of this policy, procedure, practice, structure, form, or guideline? So what is the intended impact? Why does this even exist in the first place? Why do we have this? Number 2, does this take into account differences based on social location? So part of the lens, there's a whole toolkit and there's a whole training that I do accompanying this lens, which talks about what social location is, what are all the factors, so certainly all the 17 categories defined by the Ontario Human Rights Code, but also we've added a whole bunch of others to that, and that's part of our kit. So when we're talking about social location, race, gender, class, religion, sexual orientation, the family you grew up in, whether you're on social assistance, all of those pieces and more. And then if it doesn't take into account those social location differences, which oftentimes the answer is no, then we go through 4 stages. So one is suggest possible changes to the existing policy, procedure, practice, structure, form, or guideline. I'll just stick with policy for this, for the purposes of today. Additional policies that can be created to ensure equitable outcomes. C, further inquiry, research, or consultation that may be required to determine what inequities, if any, exist. So a lot of folks, at a CS say, well, I'm not, a racialized person in a wheelchair. I'm not a Muslim new immigrant. I'm not a single mom of 3 kids. So I don't know what that's like. I don't know if this policy is actually reflective of that social location. And so we might have to do research. We might have to hold town halls. We might have to go outside of our organization to scope out people in the community. We might have to come to some of you and say, have you done research in this area? Maybe you work with a very specific population and you will know about that population and we can speak with you. And so once we've done all that, reasons that this policy cannot be made fully equitable at this time. So sometimes that's not possible right away with 800 policies. Again, it's a huge task ahead of us. We might have to pause and do 6 months, a year's worth of work, do those consultations, and then bring it back to our leadership for approval.